German cockroaches are not a hygiene problem. They are a structural infestation problem, and right now, they are almost certainly living inside appliances you use to prepare food every single day. I am going to show you the treatment method that eliminates the entire colony, not just the ones you can see. And it starts with understanding something about this specific species that changes everything about how you approach it. Why are German cockroaches fundamentally different from every other roach? Most cockroach species are outdoor insects that occasionally wander inside. German cockroaches are not. Blatella germanica evolved specifically in human dwellings over thousands of years and has become so adapted to indoor environments that it cannot survive for extended periods outside them. There is no exterior population to manage. There is no seasonal pressure driving them indoors and out again. Once they are inside a structure, they are there permanently until something deliberately eliminates them. That distinction matters enormously for treatment strategy because it means every single German cockroach in your home is part of one interconnected indoor population. And that population has specific structural vulnerabilities that make complete elimination possible when you attack the right targets in the right sequence. Here is the open loop I am going to carry through this entire video. There is one specific product combination that pest control companies use on their most severe German cockroach accounts that is almost never discussed in any consumer-facing content. It's not expensive, it is not difficult to apply, and the reason it works so dramatically better than anything most homeowners have tried is rooted in a piece of German cockroach biology that I guarantee you have never heard explained correctly. I will get there. But first you need to understand exactly why your previous treatments produce temporary results instead of permanent ones. What's their specific biology that makes standard treatment fail? A German cockroach female produces an egg capsule called an ootheca that she carries attached to her body until approximately 1 to 2 days before the eggs hatch. Each ootheca contains between 30 and 40 eggs. She produces a new ootheca roughly every 3 to 4 weeks throughout her adult life, which spans several months under typical indoor conditions. Here is the number that reframes the entire problem. A single female German cockroach and her descendants, if left completely untreated, can theoretically produce over 30,000 individuals within 12 months. That number exists to illustrate reproductive velocity, not to predict a precise outcome. But the velocity is real, and it explains why a moderate infestation that receives one inadequate treatment rapidly returns to severe levels within weeks. The biology point I promised, the one that explains why standard treatments keep failing, is this. German cockroach nymphs in their earliest developmental stages are significantly more resistant to pyrethroid insecticides than adults are. Pyrethroids are the active ingredient class in virtually every consumer roach spray product on the market. A treatment that kills every visible adult in the room leaves a surviving nymph population that matures into a new reproducing generation within 60 days. The infestation appears eliminated and then reappears seemingly from nothing because the treatment never reached the developmental stages that survived it. This is the resistance gap that the treatment method I am going to show you is specifically designed to close. How to locate the actual colony before anything goes down. Treating German cockroaches without first mapping their harborage distribution is the equivalent of treating a fire by pouring water on the smoke. You need to find where the population is actually concentrated before any product goes anywhere. German cockroaches aggregate in harborage sites that share 3 characteristics simultaneously. Tight enough that their bodies contact surfaces on multiple sides. Warm enough to accelerate egg development and metabolic function. Close enough to food and moisture that foraging distance is minimized. In a residential kitchen, those conditions exist in specific predictable locations. The motor housing compartment at the base rear of the refrigerator is the most consistently populated harborage site in the majority of German cockroach infestations. Pull your refrigerator out from the wall and inspect the motor housing with a flashlight before any treatment begins. The density of what you find there will tell you immediately how established this infestation actually is. The interior cavity of your microwave around the electronics housing, the gap between your stove and the adjacent cabinet, the compressed space where your upper cabinet bases contact the wall, inside every cabinet hinge throughout the kitchen, behind the false back of the cabinet beneath your sink where plumbing penetrates the wall. Every one of these locations needs to be inspected and documented before your first product placement, because harborage distribution determines bait placement, and bait placement determines whether your treatment reaches the queens and reproducing females or just the expendable foraging workers. What are the product combinations that nobody talks about? Here is the payoff I said was coming and the reason this video exists. The method that professional pest control operators use on their worst German cockroach accounts combines two products that are almost never discussed together in any consumer content: a non-repellent insecticide with transfer properties and an insect growth regulator applied simultaneously to every harborage site alongside strategic gel bait placement. Most people understand gel bait in isolation. The bait is consumed, the active ingredient transfers through the colony's feeding behavior, the population collapses. That mechanism works, and gel bait is genuinely the most effective single consumer product available for German cockroaches. But gel bait alone has the resistance gap I described. It reaches adults effectively and nymphs through transfer feeding, but the transfer concentration reaching the youngest nymph stages is sometimes insufficient for complete lethality. The insect growth regulator closes that gap completely. An insect growth regulator, look for pyriproxyfen or methoprene as the active ingredient on the label, mimics the juvenile hormone that controls insect development. When a nymph contacts or ingests an IGR compound at any stage of development, it cannot complete its molt to the next stage normally. Nymphs that contact IGR either die during molting attempts or develop into sterile adults incapable of reproduction. Either outcome permanently removes that individual from the reproductive cycle, regardless of whether the insecticide component reached it at sufficient concentration. The IGR does not kill quickly. That is not its function. Its function is to ensure that every cockroach in the structure that the GL bait transfer does not reach with lethal concentration is nonetheless permanently removed from the reproductive population. Bait kills the colony. IGR sterilizes the survivors. Together, they close every escape route the population has been using to recover from previous treatments. Apply the IGR as a fine mist to every harborage site surface before gel bait goes down. Harborage surfaces treated with IGR then receive gel bait placements at the same locations. Any cockroach feeding at those placements contacts both compounds simultaneously. Any cockroach that contacts the harborage surface without feeding on the bait still contacts the IGR and loses its reproductive function. So, let's talk about how applying this correctly changes the outcome entirely. Gel bait placement follows the same principle that makes this treatment so effective. Small amounts at many precise locations rather than large deposits at few locations. A pea-sized placement inside every cabinet hinged throughout the kitchen. A small placement at each corner of the refrigerator motor housing after treating the surface with IGR, inside the microwave housing through any gap in the casing. Along the wall contact line where upper cabinets meet the wall, under the lip of the sink at both corners, along the back inner wall of every drawer in the kitchen. Every placement sits directly in a confirmed harborage site or on a confirmed travel route between harborage and food source. Bait placed anywhere else is bait that does not get found, does not get fed upon, and does not generate transfer events into the colony. Leave every placement completely undisturbed for a minimum of 72 hours after application. No cleaning sprays near bait, no surface wiping near bait, no repellent products of any kind anywhere in the kitchen for the duration of the treatment. A repellent compound near bait eliminates the placement entirely. Cockroaches detect the repellent signature and will not cross it to reach the bait regardless of palatability. What the first week reveals? Activity around bait placements increases in the first 48 hours. This is the payoff moment that most people misread as treatment failure and respond to by spraying, which terminates the entire protocol instantly. Increased visible activity during the first 48 to 72 hours of bait deployment is the colony's feeding response to a newly identified food source. Workers recruiting additional colony members to a viable resource is not the infestation getting worse. It is the transfer chain accelerating. More feeding events mean faster and wider distribution of the active ingredient through the colony population. The surge peaks around day 3 and begins dropping sharply as colony mortality from active ingredient accumulation and IGR-induced reproductive failure compounds. By day 10 to 14, in a correctly executed treatment, visible activity drops to near zero in most residential infestations, regardless of how severe the initial population was. Refresh bait placements every 14 days for the first 2 months. A dried or depleted bait placement that runs out mid-cycle breaks the transfer chain and gives the surviving population time to recover before the next application. Continuous bait availability through the full reproductive suppression period is what separates treatments that produce permanent results from those that produce temporary ones. Before you go, thank you for watching. God bless.